Hi, I'm Nikki, the obsessive bookseller, and welcome to episode 2 of my book review Blitz series. This is where I showcase books and give you just a little bit more in-depth than my monthly wrap-up without committing an entire review video for them. Because I did the math and I read more than 52 books a year, but I still want to talk about everything that I read. Don't mind the decorations. Today I'm celebrating my 1-year booktube birthday, and I'm the kind of person that if I take the time to decorate, I'm going to leave them up for a while and truly bask in the moment. So happy birthday to me, and let's get on with the reviews. I'm doing 2 today, and then I will film myself on different days doing the other reviews. But the problem is I have to actually write the review first, and that takes more time than probably anything else that I do. And then, want to talk about them as I write the reviews. And the goal, instead of trying to scramble and do a whole bunch of videos the last minute, because this is one of the most time-consuming features that I have, is to kind of gradually do them. So read a book, write the friggin' review in a timely manner, film it, and then move on with your life, and then do it then when you finish the next one. And that way I won't get so far behind. But right now I've got like 11 outstanding reviews. Anyway, the first book I'd like to talk about is Living Dead in Dallas, book 2 in the Sookie Stackhouse series by Charlaine Harris. Now I've decided that I'm going to start an urban fantasy centered feature that runs like maybe bi-monthly on my channel, where I'll give you kind of a more immersive reading experience with urban fantasies and give you full reviews kind of in Blitz format on those videos. And that will free up space on this video for the basic sci-fi fantasy stuff that I've, normally do on the channel. But I really want a space to nerd out about urban fantasy. And I want to do it for the people who are actually really interested in urban fantasy. So it's getting its own feature going forward. I'm going to start with the 3rd book in this series, which I've already read, and that'll be talked about there. But we need to wrap this one up. So even though this book contained one of my least favorite writing plot points, and that's religious zealotry, I mean, when you're having a religious faction against vampires, it's kind of a given. So I let it go. But it's funny because the vampires are doing really awful things in this book, but the people with the banner behind them, just normal everyday people, do the most horrifying things in the name of religion. And kind of where it's like, who's the monster in this book? Who am I rooting for? And I do like that duality. It gives a lot of food for thought. And I know there's a lot of tropes of like, who's the real monster or whatever. But in this case, I don't think that was the message she was going for, but it's the one that I picked up on. But overall, this was an entertaining read. I really like the main character. She continues to be one of the most charming heroines in fiction for me, which is surprising because she's not my typical personality that I root for. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but she's incredibly earnest. And the fact that she makes mistakes and isn't perfect is a very endearing quality. And I'm hoping for some growth in this series. And I've seen little bits here and there, this relationship with the vampire is her first real relationship, and she's kind of learning as she goes. And obviously being thrust into the world of paranormal is kind of like a lot to handle. So I'm really enjoying that aspect. I thought the paranormal aspects and kind of expansion of what we knew about the vampires and how they related to humanity was very well explored in this book. And so I am landing at a very comfortable 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I can see why it got turned into a show. A lot of good things to work with in here. And the mystery element was cool, and I liked some of the older vampires. I thought they were really cool to read about. The romance stuff going on, it's full of a lot of angst, more so than I'm used to reading about, but it's done well enough that I'm kind of going with it, and I'm there for the rest of the paranormal aspects. For me, it's very central in the plot, but it doesn't dominate the plot. It's not the only thing the book has going for it. So yes, liked this one. By the way, the urban fantasy thing that I'm thinking about doing will probably start in August, but don't quote me on that. Okay, next I'd like to review The Body Finder by Kimberly Derting. This is book 1 in a young adult paranormal series, and I don't know what made me pick it up. I was so bogged down by these heavy fantasy tomes, and I need a break. So I threw everything, like all 8 books I had going at once aside and picked this one up and breezed through it in about 3 days. And I gotta say, I loved it more than I thought I would. Okay, first of all, I met Kimberly Derting like 10 years ago at a Vegas Valley Book Festival event. I listened to her on a panel and I met her in person, and she has to be one of the most charming, delightful authors that I have ever come across. Like, I loved her personality. I thought if any of this fun, like, just really personable way of being ends up in her books, then I'm going to be set because this was pretty cool. But it's taken me a long time to get to her works, and I've been kind of saving these for a rainy day. And then after having read the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, I realized that a specific brand of young adult mystery thrillers really works for me. Maybe I should try a few adult ones because the young adult ones are like checking all the boxes. But anyway, so the basic premise is this girl can detect dead bodies based on the essence and energy that they leave behind. Any dead body. So, she starts young finding dead squirrels and stuff and kind of helping set their souls to rest or whatever. So the magic was subtle, but it was really well used to enhance this overall mystery going on of these girls turning up dead in this town. And I loved the aspect of her having the secret that she can do this like weird thing. And then from the murderer's perspective of like, how in the heck did they find that body? That kind of thing, where there's this duality of motive and emotion, and it was really cool. If I had one complaint, it's that I wish that aspect of the story had been a little, just a smidge more dominant than the romance of the plot. But if you're gonna have a romance in your book, make it a good one. And I'm trying to think of a young adult book with a romance that I liked more than this one. So there's no insta-love here. These are characters who have a deep foundation of friendship, and you can see why they're drawn to each other. You can see the connection that they've been building for years, they're nurturing for years, and so this relationship is built on a solid foundation, and it is so much fun to read a romance where it doesn't feel like insta-love, where you can actually see the reason for the attraction to one another. If I were reading this as a teen, I would be so enamored with the way it was done and the gradual build and the drama, perfect pacing of all the like little moments between them. I thought it was superb. With books like this, you run the risk of having a stupid main character to advance plot. That's something I've come across in a lot of places where they put themselves in dumb situations just so that the author can, play off of that a little bit. This one, you just on the borderline of doing that, but it never actually went completely there for me. Maybe once. But for the most part, like, this girl made some pretty good decisions, and I could get behind the type of things that she was doing. And, yeah, justify it, if you will. With the exception of one. But I'll let one go. Like, overall, I'm really not quite sure how to rate this, because you can't compare this to a Joe Abercrombie book. It's like apples and like peas. Like there's no there's no relation whatsoever. From a pure enjoyment factor, I think I'm at a 4.5 out of 5 stars. From a quality of story and recommendability, like if you like YA, it's a solid 4-star. You know what I mean? So I don't know where I'll come in on that, but yeah, for a YA and for anything that I've read, really, for what it was trying to do, it did it very well, and I'm looking forward to continuing in the series. She has another one about like a prep school with espionage, something like that, and very vague impressions of that one, and then another one about aliens. So even before I read the second book from this, I might try the alien one, because I just, like, what could she possibly do with aliens? I want to know. So those are the 2 I have for today. We'll see what kind of mischief and reviews I can get myself to write this next week so I have more to share. Hi, Nikki here, back with another book review Blitz book. Right now I'll be talking about Joust by Mercedes Lackey. It's the first book in the Dragon Jouster series, and this is a reread for me, but I may as well not have read it before, because it had been so long. I'm pretty sure I picked it up in my teens, and I think that's like 15, 20 years ago. So yes, I was going into this with really fresh eyes, and I was wondering if it would hold up to the test of time, and if it really was as good as I thought it was, or if I was just kind of a new reader and loving everything that I picked up. That being said, I loved it just as much on the reread, if not more. This is such a dragon-centric story, and the essence of it is that you get to follow along on the day-to-day, somewhat mundane tasks of the care and keeping of a dragon. And I ate up every minute of it. I buddy read this one when I first read it, and I buddy read it again this time around, and both times it's clear that I'm the one who's rating it highest out of each group. Most of the others really liked the story, they found the dragons and the characters charming, but the pacing was a little off for them, and I can totally see that. I mean, you know, if you're not eating up every word about how to take care of these dragons, then I can see how it would be a little bit slower going before the things in the overall plot start kicking in. So if you pick it up on my high praise and recommendation, go in with a grain of salt that this is not an action-packed book at all. And in fact, the overarching plot for the whole thing, in my opinion, after rereading it, is very thin in this first book, but because I was so enamored with everything else going on, I really didn't care. And I do remember that getting better in future books, but I'd have to continue my reread to know for sure. But yes, if you want a character-driven, slow-moving, dragon-centric story, then this one is awesome. It's a twist on the boy and his dragon that I haven't seen done quite so well before. And I think the reason it works so well is because she did allow herself to just really take her time with building up this story. I'm excited to see where it goes next because I only have vague memories, and there are 3 more books in this quintet. So thankfully for me, this second time through really reaffirmed its place in my all-time favorite dragon book list. Love it. All said and done, I'm landing at a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Hey, look at me go. I actually tried to get caught up on reviews. The next one I'd like to review is Pure by Juliana Baggett. If, like me, you love the teen dystopian stories but are really sick of reading YA, this is a good recommend for you. When I was a bookseller, this title was always shelved in fiction, and the covers were so grabbing that I had to pick it up and figure out what it was about. I'm not normally a fiction reader, but to my surprise, it's a dystopian post-apocalyptic book with a lot of young adult main characters. So why is it shelved in fiction? Typically that's the publisher's call, and I can totally see why they put it there instead of in the YA category, because it is much, much darker, much grittier than your typical YA. A lot of hard-to-read, really visceral things happen in the story, to the point where the first time I read it, I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know how to handle stuff like that, so it kind of affected me a lot more than I thought it would, which is probably why I took a break from reading the series and never came back, because I'm not fortified enough to be in the mood for this right now. But I've grown a lot as a reader since then, and have gotten really into the grimdark genre. Not saying that this is grimdark by any means, but if you can handle the type of stuff you get in those books, you'll be just fine with this one. So this second time around, it was a lot easier to read, and, well, frankly, it probably helped that I knew what to expect. But it's worth noting that this is an incredibly weird book. Just to give you a loose idea, this post-apocalyptic world with, nuclear warfare or whatever, anybody who was not killed outright by the blast was fused to anyone or anything that they were touching or that was around them at the time. So you've got all these people walking around fused to each other and things, and it's just on this side of hokey. It could have gone there super easy, but I think she straddled that balance really well and kept it plausible. No, that's not the right word. Kept it serious enough that the bizarreness, it's weird, but it's not totally off-putting. It's a very fine line, though. But my recommendation is to just go with it. This is one of those series I put down but have always felt drawn back to. I reread this first one for the Read Burn Hoard project, and with the intention of finally continuing, because I read it over 10 years ago and still have been thinking about it. Like, there's some plot points in here, like, I wonder how that's going to work out. It's one of those things kind of lingering, and I'm really hoping that all of this effort I'm putting into getting back into the series is going to end up with a good payoff. Yeah, there's still a lot of enigmas, and still I want to know what happened. With any good dystopian, there's something that you're not seeing in the first book that's kind of running things, and I want to know what that is for this series. My only criticism of the book, aside from how weird it is that the characters have a few moments of, oh, super convenient brilliance where they figure stuff out without any context or build up or anything. It's just, oh, there's the answer. It was a very weird cop-out that I thought, well, that just took the whole thing down a few notches in my estimation, but I was already in the mindset of going with it, so I just went with it, but it's still annoying. So with that in mind, I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I liked it more than just a little, but I didn't love it. We'll see how the series develops. This is probably going to be the last book I review for this particular installment of Book Review Blitz. I've got 5 titles, I think, so far, and that seems to be a pretty good number for that. Next, I'd like to review Kris Longknife, Mutineer by Mike Shepard. This is book 1 in the Kris Longknife series, and I believe there's a trilogy prequel that you can get into before diving into this one, but I didn't do that. Anyway, I picked this one up for a Read Burn Hoard, and I don't have a copy here to show you because I've already put it in the unhaul pile and I don't want to go dig it back out. But yes, this one did not work for me. I've been really timid about picking it up because I had a whole bunch of them and I wasn't sure if I'd like them, but then if I did like them, then I have a whole bunch to go through, so it was going to be like really exciting. I was hoping they'd fill the role of like an urban fantasy, these really good long series that are kind of palate cleansers between other things. But alas, I don't think I liked anything about this book. Now, I presented this one in my typical DNF Q&A on Goodreads. I'll link that down below if you want the full nitty-gritty, but I'm just going to give you a summary here. I made it several chapters in before putting it down, maybe like the 10-20% mark, and I probably could have kept going, but at that point I was so fed up I was just going to be rage reading, so off it went. The main question for my Q&A is, what ultimately made you put it down? Without a doubt, poor story execution and character. First of all, the character was not being built by things that she was doing in the current day. There were so many flashbacks that I think were supposed to build her persona, but ended up just making the story feel like a slog right from the beginning. And all of it was kind of thin stuff that she was going for. Like, it was, oh yeah, she went through this traumatic thing and she did this, but you never really felt it. It wasn't an immersive thing. And instead of keeping the character kind of an enigma where you reveal the trauma that she went through kind of gradually through her experiences throughout the book, it was just like plunked at the very beginning, at least 2 or 3 chapters of drop-in. And then the author wouldn't let it go, so you get all this extensive backstory of a traumatic thing that happened to this woman, and then anytime anybody even mentioned or hinted in conversation at what she went through, oh, high drama. Such high drama where she couldn't even bear to speak or be in the moment. She was just so affected by this traumatic event. I'm definitely not belittling anything to do with trauma because it is a very serious thing that affects people all sorts of ways. And the healing process is quite extensive. But what I'm objecting to here is that this woman is military. I've never been in the military, so I'm just speaking off of like general common sense knowledge of what I know about it. But I'm pretty sure they don't let you in or have any amount of authority without some sort of background screening or checking and making sure that you are not the type of person who, at just the mere mention of a problem, goes into an extreme reaction for that kind of stuff. I would think they would have some sort of medical screening or some sort of psychologist on hand who can help you through that. Something. I'm explaining this poorly. But the idea that this woman is allowed to hold her rank without having dealt with any of that trauma is very unrealistic to me. And let's not even get into the fact that she is a poor little rich girl trying to go out on her own and do her own things. I mean, you would think if she went through that kind of trauma, which I believe her parents are aware of, that all of that money and resources would have led to some sort of mental health growth. Anyway, I don't usually dig into it that deeply, but it was such a prominent part of the story, and for me it was just completely unfeasible. And it turned the character into someone who didn't feel like a real person, but felt like something contrived. Oh, and don't even get me started on the poor little rich girl thing. That was one aspect of execution that I didn't like. The second one was where the story was going. So from the cover you get this very military forward, badass kind of vibe, and then 20% into the story where I stopped, she's on a planet in someone's kitchen talking about flour and Ghirardelli chocolates. Like, we are so far removed from what I signed up for. I'm sure all that stuff would have come later, but I'm like, it felt like a bait and switch. Like, if you want this to be heavily about the character in a military setting, keep it in a military setting. I don't know. Just, it drove me crazy. By that point, I was already fed up. But one more thing, speaking of the poor little rich girl thing, what finally made me throw in the towel was how petulant and whiny this girl was to her parents. I'm like, okay, I'm out. I can't handle this anymore. So if it was going to be all about the character, then it needed to be someone that I liked. And couldn't stand her. So, put it down. There were basically no redeeming qualities to the book. I did not like anything about it. I probably will not pick up anything else by the author. And at this point, I don't think I can recommend it. What a bummer, right? But on the bright side, I was able to clear out like 10 titles, so I've got quite a bit more extra room on my shelves. Anyway, because I didn't finish, my official rating is a DNF, but we'll just say like 1 star for Suit. And there you have the end of episode 2 of my book review Blitz. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.